Story 1. I have been and continue to become addicted to anything I remotely like. I have kicked nicotine, pain pills, alcohol, and Xanax. Getting off Xanax was the hardest thing I have ever done. Felt like I was losing my mind and wanted to crawl up the walls. Took several months to feel somewhat normal again. Story 2. As someone who has been addicted to various substances, nicotine has been my challenge. I haven't touched it in 2 years, and I think about it every day. When I consider other substances, I decline, but I still find myself wanting nicotine in any form. The withdrawal from methadone is incredibly difficult, and I sometimes try to justify using other substances to avoid cravings for nicotine. Everyone has their own experience. I don't know why it's been so hard for me, but it has been. Story 3. Opiates are incredibly challenging. I quit nicotine, alcohol, and other drugs cold turkey without issue. However, it took me a long time to overcome my addiction to opiates, with many relapses along the way. I have been clean for about 8 years now, and I have informed my wife that no opiates are allowed in our home. At the very least, I prefer not to know if they are present, as I will seek them out like a determined animal. That is how strong the addiction remains even after 8 years. Story 4. The mental programming, thoughts, fears, resentments, and guilt that fuel physical addictions. Story 5. I have quit cocaine, methamphetamine, alcohol, painkillers, and everything else, but smoking is tough. I am at 28 days now. It is challenging. Story 6. For me, it wasn't a substance. It was a person. Letting go of someone who felt like home, even when they were bad for me, was harder than anything else. Story 7. Benzodiazepine withdrawals are absolutely torturous, causing high rebound anxiety, panic attacks, insomnia, and even seizures. They can be fatal. If quitting high benzodiazepine doses, you should consult a doctor to evaluate whether you need to taper. This also applies to similar drugs such as atazolam or clonazepam. Story 8. I have an addictive personality, so I have been addicted to many things, but sports betting is particularly hard to shake. I have always loved watching sports, growing up in an athletic family and playing multiple sports. I enjoyed watching sports more than playing, as I was never competitive. Gambling, however, starts off like all other addictions. Innocent in the beginning, but it quickly spirals out of control. $5 bets turned into a cycle of losing hundreds a day, then recovering that amount in a day or two plus some, just to lose it all again. Don't get me wrong. There have been times when it has covered my nights out or trips, but the worst part is trying to enjoy a game you once loved without betting. Knowing you could have won on a certain outcome is demoralizing, but so is asking loved ones for money. I have been off for 2 days now. Apparently, it takes 2 weeks to break a habit. Story 9. Well, I experienced delirium tremens, hallucinations, and panic attacks, thinking I was going to die while withdrawing from alcohol. Alcohol and benzodiazepines are the only substances that can be fatal, so I would refer to them as the devil's poison. Story 10. I am a former addict. Cocaine was the substance I was most addicted to, although I had various substance abuse problems and several other addictions as well. I definitely have an addictive personality in more ways than one. With cocaine, I went through almost an ounce a week at my peak, although I shared a lot of it with my girlfriend and friends. Beating the addiction was difficult, but my path to recovery turned out to be straightforward and very different from others. I tried rehabilitation and 12-step programs, but they all led to relapsing the moment I could without consequence. What worked for me was simple willpower. I kept a small supply of cocaine in my house, making it difficult to access, but not so difficult that I felt completely deprived. For various reasons, the comfort of knowing that I could use it again if I wanted made it much easier for me to quit than when I didn't have access. It helped because whenever I encountered it in real life, I didn't feel the need to try it. This was especially important because I usually encountered it while drinking or when I was tired, and my inhibitions were low. I could remind myself, you have some at home if you want it, which allowed me to remember why I decided to quit and how much I had achieved by staying sober for as long as I did. I also became an alcoholic at a few points. Alcoholism runs strongly in my family, with only one male relative on my paternal side who didn't have severe alcohol dependence. When I drink more than 4 drinks in 2 hours, it becomes difficult for me to stop. I found that by limiting myself to 2 drinks in 2 hours and 4 drinks in a night, with very few exceptions, I am okay. I struggled with video game addiction and sex addiction as well. I still struggle with caffeine addiction and a social media addiction. I'm genuinely avoiding important work right now by writing this. All of this, along with my time in various rehabilitation and 12-step programs, has taught me the following. There are different forms of addiction, and it is not straightforward to determine which is universally harder to quit. Opiates have some of the most painful withdrawals, and you can die from withdrawal if not carefully managed. However, once you quit, it's not like the substance is everywhere. There is a process involved in relapsing with most narcotics, as you need to source and purchase the drug. This acts as a barrier. Alcohol can also be rough because the withdrawal can be severe. Like opiate addiction, severe alcohol withdrawal can be fatal, though this only occurs in extreme cases. Additionally, alcohol, particularly in most Western cultures, is ubiquitous. It is socially accepted and part of many traditions and social protocols, making relapse more likely. On another note, some addictions, like food addiction, can be impossible to fully quit. There is a reason so many people struggle with weight, and ironically, the more you try to control it, the more you can develop unhealthy eating habits. This can resemble a lifelong struggle. One of the factors that makes certain addictions tough to quit is the belief that they improve your life. My cocaine addiction definitely fell into this category, especially as someone who struggles with severe attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Work, success, and even exercise can become serious addictions, and it's easy to deceive yourself into believing they are harmless. Society often encourages work and praises success. However, having known some very wealthy and successful people, I can confirm that it becomes a real addiction for many, and they cannot quit. My father had both a work addiction and an exercise addiction. Although this may be hard to believe, especially now that he is in his 70s, he exercises to the point of serious health risks. Since his recent forced retirement, he no longer has his work addiction and now spends all day at the gym, biking, or swimming, only interrupted by excessive drinking. He is dangerously underweight and has been passing out during exercise almost monthly. Ultimately, if I learned one thing from my struggles with addiction, it's that it's almost pointless to judge one addiction as better or worse than others. Different addictions come with different challenges that can be more difficult for various individuals. Story 11. Sincerely, love addiction. I have gotten through a few of the others, but losing the girl I loved with no contact was the hardest thing I have ever experienced. Story 12. I haven't had a cigarette in 20 years, but I would still like to light one up. Story 13. In a practical sense, alcohol and benzodiazepines can be dangerous. If you abruptly stop usage, it can lead to severe complications. I am referring to individuals with serious addiction issues. Story 14. Social media and phone addiction is prevalent, as it is often the primary means of staying in touch with people, especially when living abroad. Story 15. I am currently having a very hard time quitting marijuana use. I have been trying for 3 months now with no luck. It might not be chemically addictive, but it is definitely psychologically addictive and habit-forming. Does anyone have any advice on how to quit? Or at least a success story about someone who quit and feels great now? I need a ray of hope. Story 16. For several years after quitting smoking, I would have dreams that I was smoking again. When I woke up, I would wonder if I had actually started smoking again. Story 17. Coffee and caffeine. I didn't realize how bad it was until I tried to stop at my doctor's suggestion. I had to slowly wean by mixing decaf over time. Story 18. I have been physically addicted to heroin, opiates, methadone, cocaine, benzodiazepines, and nicotine. Benzodiazepines are by far the hardest and longest withdrawal. I didn't feel normal for over a year, and I believe it damaged my brain chemistry permanently. With the opiates, the physical part passes fairly quickly, but the mental part is another story. I am grateful there was no street fentanyl around back then, or I am sure I would be dead. I celebrated 25 years of sobriety this year. Story 19. Junk food and sugar can have a significant impact, especially for those who grew up overweight, faced an eating disorder, or had an unsupportive environment. The combination of these factors can be particularly detrimental. Story 20. Heroin, opiates, alcohol, and Xanax. Personally, I think Xanax is the hardest to withdraw from. You experience hallucinations. Apparently, that occurs with alcohol withdrawal, but I have never witnessed it. With heroin and opiates, you feel like you have the flu magnified. It's horrific. You sweat excessively, your joints ache, you may vomit or have diarrhea, and you develop an overwhelming sensation of wanting nothing to touch your skin. Everything feels uncomfortable and too intense. Story 21. Alcohol is legal to buy and is widely available. Withdrawal symptoms can be severe, and the damage caused by alcohol can be irreparable. My wife is permanently disabled from it and has memory issues at 43 years old. Story 22. I gave up my addiction to meth and cocaine, but quitting cigarettes was difficult. I stuck with it. I never thought I could give up sugar, but I am now on day 12. Story 23. I have never tried to overcome any addiction except sugar. It is legal, inexpensive, and widely available, and its health detriment is subtle. I am sure that quitting drugs is more difficult, but sugar is the one I struggle with the most. Story 24. Definitely, it is a case of pornography addiction. With the internet making it readily available, there is a limitless catalog of fantasy. Your mind may continue to warp from this exposure. The sad part is that once your brain stops producing the happy chemicals associated with real sexual interactions, it can be nearly impossible to recover that state. Story 25. For non-substance-based addiction, it has to be pornography. No other addictions are associated with your natural body cycle. Even if you get clean, someday you are going to feel the natural urge, and it is much more easily accessible as well. Story 26. That's a unique question. Some people can quit any substance abruptly, but may struggle with a severe gambling addiction. Others may develop an addiction to activities like masturbation. You can become addicted to anything, and your relationship with that addiction is a significant factor in how difficult it is to change. Story 27. The hardest addiction is hope, love, or another human. Attempting to help the person who was your everything while they battle their addictions, in this case ketamine and nitrous, is incredibly challenging. You see the beautiful person they are underneath it all, the innocent, bubbly, kind-hearted individual full of laughter. Yet, they are constantly ripped from your arms by these horrific substances that turn them into a shadow of themselves, making them unkind towards you, and you watch them drift further away. You fight tooth and nail to reach any part of that joyful person trapped inside. You strive for their return only for the cycle to repeat. I constantly tell myself I am done with the lies, cheating, and secrets. I remind myself that I deserve better and that I am finished with the abuse, only to fall back into it all at the first sign of hope. At the first sign of that remarkable person returning and the shadow of addiction lifting, just for the vicious cycle to repeat months later. Story 28. Well, that depends on a variety of factors. There are many things in the world that one can become addicted to, making it difficult to provide a simple answer to that question. However, I can answer for you. Why are you asking this question? Story 29. For me, it was gambling. What makes gambling and food addictions uniquely difficult is that you still have to deal with the substance every day. You can stay away from nicotine, meth, and other drugs, but you need money and food to live, especially these days with access to sports gambling in your pocket. Thank goodness that wasn't my issue or a big deal at the time I quit 3 years ago. Can you imagine being a recovering crack addict and having to walk around with a bag of crack in your pocket? I feel bad for the teenagers getting into it. It seems like it's only a matter of time before we start seeing regular news reports of gambling-related suicides. Story 30. Nicotine was easy to quit, which I attribute to preparing for bodybuilding. Quitting nicotine is nothing compared to going months without eating chocolate, cake, or savory snacks. I quit smoking marijuana 2 years ago and did so cold turkey because of my new job that required drug tests. I also quit smoking tobacco cold turkey later on. It's all purely mental. Story 31. Crystal meth and opiates create the illusion of well-being when taking Suboxone. People still abuse it for euphoria. The doctor becomes just another dealer, and if it were any better, they wouldn't prescribe naloxone with it. Story 32. Honestly, alcoholism is a serious issue. I managed to overcome nicotine addiction, but alcoholism is not discussed enough. People with addictions are often seen as normal, as drinking in pubs is so common. It has become so normalized that if you don't drink, you may feel like the odd one out. Story 33. I'm gonna sound really corny here, but breakups can be difficult. The addiction to the oxytocin, dopamine, and other chemicals you get from that person can be a true pain when it's gone. Story 34. Gambling has ruined my life multiple times, and I am currently going through another recovery from relapse. The nature of the addiction makes it feel like the only way out is through. You start losing and believe firmly that you will win it back. Then you find yourself out of money and realize you didn't even have fun. You just wanted to clean up your mess. It is incredibly accessible, and even after self-excluding from multiple sites, there is always another one available. Story 35. Medically, from what I know, benzodiazepines, opioids, and stimulants are the top 3 substances. I want to be a psychiatrist, but this information may not be entirely accurate. I am currently dealing with stimulant addiction related to ADHD. Story 36. Out of the many substances I have given up, being sober for 4 years, cigarettes were the hardest. I am in long-term recovery from alcohol, but at this point, it is more about helping me improve my life. Story 37. I quit vaping almost 3 months ago. I used to smoke cigarettes before I started vaping, usually smoking about 3 or 4 cigarettes a day. Just before quitting, I calculated how much nicotine I was really consuming, and it equated to around 4 packs of cigarettes a day. It's so easy to use it all day. You don't even need to go outside. I probably used it every 10 to 15 seconds while I was awake. It's honestly a miracle I was able to quit cold turkey. Unlike cigarettes, where I had a few triggers such as coffee, mornings, and cold weather, everything was a trigger for me because I was used to constantly using it. Story 38. My dad smoked cigarettes, then switched to a pipe, and eventually returned to cigarettes over the course of about 25 years. One day, he woke up and said, I quit. No complaining, no shakes, no mood swings. He simply decided to quit. Now, if I wake up and find that temptation is standing between me and my cigarettes, along with the coffee maker, it would be a real challenge. Oh, how I want to quit. Story 39. Porn is very harmful, especially after engaging in substance abuse. The cravings can become similar to those experienced with opioids, almost like an impulse. Story 40. Food. People say the only way to beat addiction is to stop engaging in whatever it is you're addicted to. However, you cannot stop eating. You must find a way to overcome the addiction or risk severe consequences. Thankfully, glucagon-like peptide 1 drugs can actually help address intrusive thoughts about food. Story 41. Biting my nails. I currently cannot concentrate at work because they feel too long. I'm trying to quit, but I can't stop fidgeting with my fingertips. It just feels off. Story 42. Smoking connects with various life situations. People often smoke with coffee in the morning or after intimate moments when feeling stressed. It has become a prevalent habit that is hard to avoid. Story 43. I hear opiates are the worst, possibly followed by alcohol, nicotine, cocaine, and marijuana. I'm glad I haven't experienced those situations. Story 44. The correct answer that seems to be absent from this discussion is benzodiazepines, with alcohol being similarly harmful. Story 45. Steroids can be difficult because you look great while using them and receive many compliments. When you stop, you lose most of the gains and people think you have stopped training and appear unwell. You also feel strong while using them, but when you stop, you may feel the opposite, which can be very depressing. Story 46. I frequently discuss this in my music. It has been very therapeutic and helpful for me to express my pain through my songs. I am 33 years old and opiates have had a significant hold on me. I was in 2 serious car accidents. The first was in 2016. I was on oxycodone until 2021 when I finally recovered. Getting off was a challenging mental battle, but I eventually became clean. 30 days later, someone ran a red light and almost killed me. I suffered a broken neck, shoulder, and more. Since then, I have undergone numerous surgeries and take a substantial amount of opiates daily. It is not nearly enough to manage my pain, but is the maximum prescribed by the clinic I visit. Without these medications, I cannot work or play with my daughters. I struggle to get out of bed without them. There have been months where I had to go without them for a few days, and those times are unbearable. I have been prescribed alprazolam, but it does not alleviate the suffering I experience without opiates. I feel as though they control my life. I despise this dependency, but without them, I endure an indescribable amount of pain. Story 47. Quitting certain habits can be challenging with varying levels of difficulty. Here's a ranked list from most challenging to least difficult to quit. 1. Masturbation, almost impossible for me. 2. Vivance, the withdrawal can make you feel terrible for 3 to 5 weeks. Feels like life has been drained from you. Alcohol, not particularly hard to withdraw from after the first 6 to 10 days, depending on consumption levels. While alcoholics may struggle significantly, my experience with quitting was less difficult than Vivance. It becomes hard to quit once it turns into a habit. Tobacco. I smoked between 5 to 7 cigarettes a day for 7 years and successfully quit on my first attempt. If you're considering quitting, it can surprisingly be easy. The physical dependence doesn't last long. While psychological cravings occur, they are not nearly as intense as with Vivance or alcohol. Story 48. Any of them may feel forced to quit. Free will and choice will significantly impact how difficult this process is. Story 49. I would say sugar and sweeteners are in practically everything we eat. They are highly addictive and found in almost all products we consume. The vast majority of items containing them do not even need them. They are merely used to satisfy a dopamine hit and encourage more purchases. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.